The black trash bag landed on the bed before the sun had cleared the rooftops of the cul-de-sac. It was the thick, industrial kind, the sort men use for hauling dead leaves in October. Black as a wet road in November. And it made a soft, heavy sound when it hit the blanket near Eliza Mercer's feet. Dale Caldwell stood in the doorway with his arms folded across his chest, and he did not speak right away. He had always been good at that. He let the silence do the heavy lifting first, the way another man might let a dog do the barking. He stood there in his slippers and his undershirt, and he watched the bag settle, and he watched the girl on the bed, and he waited. Eliza was already awake. She had been awake since 4 o'clock that morning, lying flat on her back in the narrow bed she had slept in for 11 years, watching the ceiling fan turn its slow circles in the gray light. She had known this day was coming. She had known it the way a deer knows. The first hard frost is coming in the bones, in the marrow, in the quiet places that don't need a calendar to keep time. But she had a calendar anyway. She had seen it 2 months ago out in the workshop when she went looking for the bicycle pump. There on the wall above the table saw was a wall calendar from the hardware store, and one square had been circled in red marker, pressed down hard, so the ink had bled at the edges. Her 18th birthday. And above the circle in Dale's small, cramped hand, 2 words. Freedom Day. She had stood out there in the cold workshop holding the bicycle pump in both hands, and she had felt something inside her chest go cold and still, like a pond freezing over from the middle out. She had not told her mother. There was no point in telling her mother anything anymore. Her mother had been gone for a long time, even while she sat right there at the kitchen table. So when the bag landed on the bed at 6:53 in the morning, the day after her 18th birthday, Eliza did not flinch. She did not turn her head. She kept her eyes on the ceiling fan and let it turn. "Just clothes," Dale said. "Personal items, the furniture stays. You got until noon." Then he walked away, his slippers whispering down the hallway toward the kitchen, where the coffee maker had already begun its low morning gurgle. And Eliza lay there a full minute longer before she sat up. She did not cry. She had used up her crying a long time ago. Spent it on smaller things the way a poor man spends his last dollars on bread instead of saving them for rent. She had cried at 12 when Dale would not let her have a birthday party. She had cried at 14 when he would not sign the permission slip for the school trip to Washington. She had cried over 1,000 small refusals, each one carving a little more out of her, until there was nothing left in the well to draw up. She packed. It did not take long. 2 pairs of jeans, both worn thin and pale at the knees. 4 shirts. A handful of socks and underwear. Her toothbrush. The fast food uniform she still wore 4 nights a week for 12 hours of pay. A hairbrush. A small cloth bag of toiletries. And then, from the top drawer of her nightstand, wrapped in a square of clean dish towel, the only thing in that room that had ever truly belonged to her. A photograph. It was creased at the corners and faded soft around the edges. It showed a young man, 24 years old, sitting on a couch with a baby cradled against his chest in a yellow blanket. The young man was looking down at the baby with an expression Eliza had spent 15 years trying to memorize, the way you memorize the face of someone you are afraid you will forget. On the back in pencil, in a hand she had never once seen move across a page, someone had written Daniel and Eliza first week home. Daniel Mercer, her father. He had died when she was 3 years old. a construction accident. That was all her mother had ever said about it. That was all anyone had ever said about it in 11 years in that whole house. She slid the photograph into the front pocket of her duffel bag, the one flat spot where it would not get bent, and she pulled the zipper shut. She carried the duffel over one shoulder and the black trash bag in her other hand, because she had no other suitcase, and she walked down the stairs in her sneakers and stopped at the bottom in the doorway of the kitchen. Her mother was at the sink. Maureen Caldwell was 42 years old, and she had once been beautiful. There was a photograph somewhere in the house in a drawer Eliza had long ago stopped opening that showed her mother at 23, head tipped back, laughing at something her hair caught mid-toss in the sunlight. The woman in that photograph was gone. The woman at the sink now had thin shoulders and graying hair pulled back hard into a knot, and she was washing a pan that was already clean. Around and around in the soapy water, the same slow circles over and over, scrubbing at nothing. "Mom," Eliza said. The sponge kept moving. "Mom, look at me." Maureen shut off the water. She dried her hands on a dish towel, slowly taking far more time than the job required. And when she finally turned around, she looked at her daughter for about 1 second before her eyes slid down to the floor and stayed there. "You'll be fine," Maureen said. "You're an adult now. I have $34. You have a job. I have a part-time job, Mom. They give me 12 hours a week." Maureen folded the dish towel. She set it on the counter. Then she picked it up and folded it again. Her mouth was a thin, flat line, and her eyes were red at the rims, but her voice came out dry and even, as if she were reading words off a card somebody had pressed into her hand. "Dale's right," she said. "It's time." And what Eliza saw in her mother's face in that moment was not cruelty. It was not anger. It was something far worse than either. It was relief. The kind of relief a person feels when a heavy thing they have been carrying for a very long time is finally about to be set down on the ground. Eliza did not say goodbye. She turned and walked through the living room past the couch where she had done 11 years of homework. Past the television Dale watched every single night while she stood in the kitchen and ate her dinner off a paper plate. She opened the front door. She stepped out into the cold morning, and she pulled the door shut behind her with a soft, final click. Her car sat at the curb. A 2004 Honda Civic she had bought 8 months ago with $300 of saved-up fast food money and a $500 loan from her shift manager. Paid back $50 a paycheck until the debt was gone. The check engine light had been on for 3 months. The passenger window did not close all the way at the top, leaving a finger-wide gap that let in the rain and the cold and the smell of whatever street she happened to be parked on. She threw the duffel into the back seat. She set the trash bag down beside it. She slid behind the wheel. And then she just sat there. She looked at the house. She looked up at the second-floor window where her bedroom had been. She looked at the kitchen window where her mother was almost certainly still standing at the sink, washing a pan that did not need washing, and she understood with a clarity that frightened her that she was not coming back. Not for visits, not for holidays, not ever. She turned the key. The engine coughed twice and caught. She pulled away from the curb. and she did not look in the rearview mirror because there was nothing back there worth looking at. The first night, she parked at a Walmart on the edge of town. She pulled in at dusk into the row farthest from the building behind a long line of campers and box trucks, where she hoped a single Honda Civic with a girl inside it would not draw a second glance. She leaned the seat back as far as it would go. She balled an old sweatshirt against the window for a pillow. She pulled her jacket over herself like a blanket. She did not sleep. Not really. She surfaced 4 separate times in the dark, though she could never remember sinking under in between. The first time, a diesel truck idled in the next row, the cab vibrating, the engine grumbling low like something alive. The second time, footsteps came down the row of parked cars, slow and even, and stopped right beside her door. She lay perfectly still with her eyes shut and her hand under the sweatshirt. Her fist closed tight around her keys, ready to start the engine and drive. After a minute, the footsteps moved on. The third time, somebody 2 cars over was trying the door handles, lifting them one by one and letting them fall a soft metallic click again and again. A man moving down the row, testing each car, like a shopper running his hand along a rack of coats. He did not try hers. The fourth time, she came awake for no reason at all and lay staring at the gray ceiling of the Civic until the sky outside turned the color of dirty milk and the sun finally came up. She bought a coffee at the McDonald's across the lot for $1.19. She sat in the booth as long as they would let her. She brushed her teeth in their bathroom and washed her face in the sink and dried it with the rough brown paper towels. And she looked at herself in the mirror, and she did not recognize the girl looking back at her. She had no plan. So she drove. She filled the tank with $9 of gas at a Sunoco off the interstate, and she ate a cheeseburger off the dollar menu sitting on the hood of the car, watching a hawk turn slow wheels above an empty field. The second night it rained and she parked behind a closed lumberyard because she could not face another Walmart lot in the rain. She listened to the water drum on the roof for a long time. She thought about her mother. She thought about the young man in the photograph holding a baby in a yellow blanket. She thought about all the things she did not know about her own life, all the questions she had been told in 100 small ways never to ask. And she fell asleep with her hand resting on the front pocket of the duffel where the photograph was. The third night, she parked at a rest stop on the interstate under a row of tall pines that swayed and hissed in the wind. The bathrooms were open all night, and there was a coffee machine that took quarters. She drank a cup that tasted like burnt cardboard, and she sat on a cold wooden picnic bench in the dark, and she did something she had not done since she was a small child. She prayed. She had not been raised on prayer. Her mother had stopped going to church the year Daniel died, and Dale called religion a tax on stupid people. And so Eliza had grown up in a house where the name of God was spoken only as a curse. But she had a memory very faint and very old of a woman holding her in a wooden pew somewhere, and the smell of lemon furniture polish and a man's voice rising and falling above her head. She did not know whose memory it was. She did not even know for certain that it was hers. But on that third night, she closed her eyes and she whispered into the cold dark, "If there's anybody out there," she said, "I could use some help." That was all. She did not know what else to ask for. She finished the coffee. She went back to the car, and she slept 4 hours straight without waking the longest unbroken stretch of sleep she had managed in 3 days. When she woke, the sun was warm on her face, and her phone was buzzing on the passenger seat, a number she did not recognize. She had never in her life let an unknown number ring through to voicemail. She always answered. But she was tired this morning and she was hungry, and she did not have the strength to pretend to be a person who had her life together. The phone rang a second time, a third. On the fourth ring, she picked up. Miss Mercer. The voice was a man's, older, careful, slow, with the long, flat vowels of someone who has lived all his life in cold country. This is Arthur Glenn of Glenn and Whitcomb Attorneys. I'm calling regarding the estate of Walter Mercer. She closed her eyes against the morning light. My grandfather died a long time ago, she said, before I was born. There was a pause on the line. Then the voice came back gentler than before, as if the man were setting something heavy down on a soft surface so it would not break. Miss Mercer, your grandfather, Walter Mercer, passed away 6 months ago, the 14th of October. He was 76 years old. He lived in a town called Cedar Hollow, about 5 hours north of your listed address, and he named you the sole beneficiary of his estate. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ear, a slow, heavy knocking. That's not possible, she said. My mother told me he died before I was born. I can assure you, Miss Mercer, he was alive until last October. He came to my office every spring to update his will. Every spring for 15 years. The voice paused. And every spring he asked me the same question. He asked whether I had been able to find you yet. Eliza could not speak. She held the phone against her ear and stared through the windshield at the pines moving in the wind. And she felt something shift deep inside her chest. A wall she had been leaning against her whole life, that she had assumed was load-bearing, that she had built her balance on, was suddenly silently not there anymore. What did he leave me? She finally said. It did not come out like a question. A cabin, the lawyer answered. He built it himself, from what I understand. The property is paid in full. No liens, no back taxes. He saw to that. He also left certain personal effects that he specifically asked me to keep at the property, rather than in my office. Arthur Glenn gave her the address. He gave her the name of the road, the directions off the highway, the spot where she would find the key under a brick beside the porch step. He told her his own office sat on the main street of Cedar Hollow across from the post office, and that he had been trying to reach her for months. The phone number we had on file was disconnected, he said. I mailed letters to your mother's address. None of them were ever answered. She thanked him. She hung up, and she sat there for 20 minutes, both hands locked on the wheel, staring at the trees. Then she got out, walked into the little gas station beside the rest stop, and bought a paper road map of Vermont for $2.99, because her phone was almost out of data for the month. She unfolded it on the hood of the Civic in the cold morning light. Cedar Hollow was up north, way up north, almost to the Canadian line, up in the green-shaded country, where the roads turned thin and twisted, and the towns were too small to print their names out in full. She drove 3 more hours that day, stretching her gas as far as it would go. She stopped at a used bookstore and a strip mall in some town she would never remember, and she sold 3 high school textbooks she had kept for no reason at all. The man behind the counter, an older fellow with white whiskers and a careful way of handling the books gave her $18 for the lot. He looked at her a long moment over the top of his glasses. "You all right, miss?" "Yes, sir." He looked at her a moment longer. Then he reached under the counter without a word and handed her a granola bar. She took it. She thanked him. She walked out to the Civic and ate it, standing in the parking lot watching a pickup roll by with a black Labrador in the bed, its ears flapping in the wind. She drove north. The suburbs gave way to strip malls, and the strip malls gave way to farmland, and the farmland gave way to trees, and the trees grew taller and darker and pressed closer together as the road climbed up into the foothills. The two-lane highway followed a river for a long stretch, the water slate gray and quick over the rocks, and she rolled her broken window the rest of the way down, despite the cold, because she wanted to smell the air. It smelled like cut hay and wood smoke, and the cold mineral breath of a creek running over stone. She passed a sign, Cedar Hollow. Population 800 and something, the last digit faded past reading. The road dipped into a narrow valley where the trees opened up onto a single main street, maybe 4 blocks long before the woods swallowed it again on the far side. The town was small. Not charming small, just small. A hardware store with a faded green awning, a diner with the lights on and 3 pickups parked at angles out front, a little white church with a steeple, a post office that looked like it had once been somebody's shed. And at the end of the block, set back a little from the road, a general store with words painted in fading red letters above the door, Hadley's Mercantile. The lawyer's office was already dark. It was almost 5 o'clock. She would go in the morning. She pulled the Civic into one of the angled spaces in front of the general store because she did not know what else to do, and a bell rang above the door as she pushed it open. The woman behind the counter looked up from a clipboard. She was somewhere in her late 60s. Her gray hair was pulled back into a loose braid that hung down over one shoulder. She wore reading glasses pushed up onto her forehead, and a flannel shirt buttoned all the way to the throat. And she had the strong, square hands of a woman who had spent her whole life doing useful work. She looked at Eliza standing there in the doorway, duffel bag over her shoulder, and her hands went still on the clipboard. Her face did not change exactly, but something behind it shifted. She set down her pen. She took the reading glasses off her forehead and laid them carefully on the counter beside the clipboard. "You're Walter's granddaughter," she said. Eliza stopped halfway between the door and the counter. The whole store had gone very quiet. A small refrigerator hummed behind the woman. From somewhere in the back came the soft tick of a clock. "How did you know that—" The woman came around the counter slowly, the way you move when you don't want to spook a deer. She stopped a careful distance away and looked at Eliza's face, the way a person looks at a photograph they haven't seen in many years. "Because you look exactly like your father," she said. The words went into Eliza like a fishhook and set. "I'm Pearl Hadley," the woman said. "I knew your grandfather the better part of 30 years. I was about the closest friend he had in this world, and he talked about you every single day for 15 years. Eliza stood there in the middle of the store with the duffel pulling on her shoulder and her sneakers wet from the parking lot, and she could not make her mouth work. Pearl did not try to hug her. Pearl did not get emotional. She just looked at the girl with eyes that were warm and steady and patient. The eyes of a woman who had been waiting a long time for this exact moment to walk in through her door. And she nodded once slowly, as if to say, "All right then, let's begin. Have you eaten today?" "I had a granola bar." Pearl walked to the back of the store and came out 2 minutes later with a brown paper bag. She set it on the counter and began putting things in it without asking. A loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, 2 apples, a bottle of water, a box of crackers, a small block of yellow cheese wrapped in wax paper, a package of bologna, a roll of paper towels. "I can't pay for those," Eliza said. Pearl did not look up. "Walter paid for these," she said, "a long time ago. He left money at this store every month. Said it was for the day you came." She pushed the bag across the counter toward the girl. "I've been setting it aside." Eliza reached for the bag, and her hand was shaking so hard she had to steady it with the other one. She did not cry, but her eyes filled and she stood there holding the brown paper bag and looking at Pearl Hadley through a glaze of water she would not let fall. "What was he like?" she said. Pearl leaned back against the counter and folded her arms across her chest and looked out the front window at the dusk gathering over the main street. "He was a carpenter," she said. 40 years a carpenter. Built houses up and down this whole valley. After your father died, he went through a hard stretch. Drinking. 2 bad years. But he pulled himself up out of it. Got sober and stayed sober. And then he spent every year after that working on that cabin out on Old Creek Road." She paused. "Built the whole thing with his own 2 hands. Every nail, every board, every joint. Took him 15 years. Why didn't he find me?" Pearl looked at her then, and there was something hard in her eyes. Hard, like a held breath, not aimed at Eliza, but at something far off. Something she could not yet say out loud. "He tried honey," Pearl said. "Lord, he tried everything there was to try." She gave Eliza directions. 2 miles up Old Creek Road. Take the left fork, where the road splits at the dead birch. The mailbox has no name on it. "You go on out there now," Pearl said. "Get yourself settled. I'll come by tomorrow." Eliza drove with the brown paper bag riding on the passenger seat next to the photograph of her father. The road went from pavement to gravel to packed dirt, and the trees pressed in on both sides until the sky was just a thin ribbon of pale evening overhead. The Civic bounced and jolted along the ruts. A deer crossed the road in front of her and froze with one foreleg lifted. And she stopped, and they looked at each other a long moment before it flicked its tail and stepped into the underbrush. She came around the last bend and she saw the cabin. It sat at the end of the road in a clearing of mowed grass. 1 story. A covered porch running the full width of the front with a railing that needed sanding. The roof was weathered cedar shake. But even from the driveway, even in the failing light, she could see that every line of it was straight. Every angle was true. Every joint was tight. And the door frame had been carved by hand. A pattern of leaves and branches ran along the top of it, deep cut every single leaf different from every other leaf. The kind of work that takes a man weeks. The kind of work no machine can do. She found the brass key under the brick beside the porch step, exactly where Arthur Glenn had told her it would be. The key was old and heavy and warm from sitting in the day's sun. She slid it into the lock and the door swung open without a sound. The hinges had been oiled recently. Somebody had been keeping this place up. Inside, the cabin smelled like cedar and dust and the faint, sweet tang of beeswax. A small living room with a stone fireplace. A kitchen with one window over the sink and a wood-burning cook stove against the back wall. A short hallway to one bedroom and one small bath. Everything built from the same warm-toned pine. Every shelf level. Every drawer sliding open and shut without a catch. Nothing creaked. The floorboards were fitted so tight you could not have slid a sheet of paper between them. She set her duffel down on the floor and she walked through the rooms, slowly running her hand along the walls, opening drawers and finding them empty. Opening cabinets and finding them empty, standing at the kitchen window and looking out at the backyard, where an old oak spread its branches over a square of weeds that had once long ago been a garden. There was no furniture except a single wooden chair by the fireplace and a small table beside it. And on the mantel above the fireplace, all by itself, a brass candlestick with a half-burned candle. She found a broom in the closet, and she swept the floors. She wiped the counters with a damp rag from a drawer. She turned the kitchen tap, and brown water spat out for 10 seconds before it ran clear. She tested the bathroom sink. She tested the bedroom light. Everything worked. She made herself a peanut butter sandwich, and she sat down on the living room floor with her back against the wall by the fireplace, and she ate it slowly, listening to the deep silence of the cabin and the wind moving in the pines outside, and the whole long weight of the day caught up with her in one slow wave that pressed her back against the wall and made her close her eyes. 3 days of driving. 3 days alone. $34 and a paper bag of groceries and a cabin in the North Woods that an old man she had never met had built with his own 2 hands and left to her. She opened her eyes, and that was when she saw it. The baseboard, the one running along the wall right beside her, the one her shoulder was almost touching. It was the same warm pine as every other baseboard in the cabin, the same smooth finish, the same clean joint where it met the corner, but it sat differently against the wall. Every other baseboard in this place was flush-tight pressed against the drywall, with the seamless precision of a man who measured twice and cut once. This one had a gap, a hair-thin line that ran the entire length of the board, not from settling, not from warping. The gap was perfectly uniform, the exact same width the whole way across. It was not a flaw. It was deliberate. It was built to move. She set the half-eaten sandwich down on the floor. She got onto her knees. She pressed her palm flat against one end of the board, and nothing happened. She pressed the other end. The board slid sideways on hidden tracks, smooth and silent, and disappeared into the wall. Behind it was a compartment, cedar-lined, about 8 inches deep and 2 feet across. And sitting inside, side by side, were 3 wide envelopes. Each one was labeled in a careful, steady hand. Eliza, age 6. Eliza, age 7. Eliza, age 8. She picked up the first one with fingers that had gone numb. She slid her thumb under the flap, and the seal gave way without resistance. Inside was a birthday card. A simple thing, a child's drawing of a yellow cake with 3 candles on the front. She opened it. "Happy birthday, Eliza. I hope this one reaches you." I sent a card to your mother's house, but it came back like the others. So I am keeping this one here instead. You are 6 years old today, and I have never once stopped thinking about you. Your father would be so proud of the girl you are becoming, even though I'm not allowed to see it. I love you, sweetheart. Grandpa Walter. She sat on the floor of the cabin her grandfather had built, and she cried. Not quietly, not with any kind of composure. She pulled her knees up to her chest and pressed the card against her heart and sobbed until her ribs ached, until the light through the window turned orange and then gray, and the room went dim around her. He had not forgotten her. He had never forgotten her. He had been right here the whole time, writing her name on envelopes she would never receive, sealing them up and tucking them into the bones of a house he was building for the day she would finally come home. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She reached for the second envelope. It was thicker than the first. Happy birthday, Eliza. You are 7 today. I drove past your mother's house last week. I parked my truck across the street and I sat there for an hour. I could see your bedroom light on. I wanted to walk up and knock on that door more than I have ever wanted anything in my life. But the order from the court says I cannot come within 200 feet of you. So I sat in the truck and I watched your light until it went out. Then I drove home and I wrote you this card. I love you, sweetheart. Grandpa Walter. She pressed her hand flat against the floor to keep from pitching forward. She opened the third. Happy birthday, Eliza. You are 8. I filed a petition with the court last month asking for the right to visit you. The judge denied it. Your mother's lawyer said I was an unfit influence. I have been sober 2 years now, but the things I did before that still follow me around. Like a dog I cannot chase off. I'm gonna keep trying anyway. I will never stop trying. I love you. Grandpa Walter. 3 cards. 3 years of a man reaching out across a distance toward a granddaughter who did not even know he was alive. Eliza put the cards back into their envelopes one by one and set them on the floor beside her. And she looked into the open compartment, into that cedar-lined hollow that had been hidden in the wall of the cabin for over a decade waiting. The tracks were smooth. The fit was perfect. Somebody had built this hiding place with the same patient care as every other joint in the house. She was certain there were more. She got to her feet, her legs stiff from sitting so long, and she walked the perimeter of the living room, pressing her palms to baseboards, knocking on walls, running her fingers along every seam where wood met wood. Nothing moved. She went into the kitchen. She started opening cabinets. She checked the backs of shelves. She pulled the drawers out as far as they would go and looked behind them. Walter Mercer had been a carpenter for 40 years. He had known exactly how to make a thing invisible. She almost missed it. The panel under the kitchen sink looked like a single solid piece of pine, the same straight grain as every other panel in the room. But when she pressed her thumb along the bottom edge, she felt the faintest give. She pressed harder. The panel tipped forward on a hidden hinge and swung down toward her, opening a hollow behind the plumbing. Inside, stacked in a careful pile, were 6 more envelopes, ages 9 through 14. She opened them in order one by one, sitting on the cold kitchen floor under the single bare bulb. And the handwriting was the same in every one, and the cards were the same simple kind, the cakes and the balloons, and the small, careful watercolors and the words inside were the same words, said 6 different ways. I am still here, Eliza. I have not forgotten. I think about you every single day that the good Lord gives me. And tucked behind each card, folded once and slipped between the paper and the cardboard backing, were small bills. 20s, 50s, 6 years of birthday money she had never received. She counted it there on the kitchen floor with her hands not quite steady. $420. The card from age 12 was longer than the others. Eliza, I mail a card to your mother's house every year, and every year it comes back to me marked Return to Sender. So I keep them here instead. I don't know if you will ever lay eyes on these, but I write them anyway because the only other choice is to do nothing. And I made a promise to your father that I would never do nothing. Not ever again. She held that card in both hands and the floor seemed to tilt under her. Behind the envelopes, pushed all the way to the back of the hollow, was something else. A small wooden box about the size of a paperback book. She drew it out carefully. It was heavier than it looked. The wood was sanded glass smooth and finished with a soft hand-rubbed oil. And there was a tiny brass clasp on the front no bigger than a dime. She opened it. A music box mechanism sat inside the brass comb and cylinder fitted into a cradle hollowed out of the same pine, with a little winding key on the outside. She turned the key 3 times. She let it go. And the cabin filled with a lullaby, slow, gentle, a tune she did not know, though something far back in her mind, very faint, told her she had heard it once somewhere a long time ago, in a memory she could not quite reach. On the inside of the lid, burned into the wood with a fine-tipped iron, were 5 words. I made this for you. Eliza sat on the kitchen floor and held the music box in her lap and let it play until it wound itself down, and the silence after it stopped was the deepest silence she had ever heard. She wound it again. She closed her eyes, and for one moment in that small wooden cabin at the end of the dirt road, with the night pressing black against the windows and the wind walking through the pines, she did not feel alone. She was still sitting there with the box in her hands when she heard tires on the gravel. Headlights swept across the kitchen window. An engine cut off. A door opened and shut. Footsteps came up the porch steps, and then a soft knock at the front door. She got to her feet, crossed the living room and opened it. And Pearl Hadley was standing on the porch holding a casserole dish wrapped in a towel. Didn't want to come too early, Pearl said. Figured you'd need a night to settle, but then I figured maybe you'd also need supper. She lifted the dish a little. Chicken and rice. Nothing fancy. Eliza took it. It was still warm through the towel, and she did not trust herself to speak. Pearl stepped inside without being asked the way a person does in a house they have stood in 100 times before, and set her purse on the little side table by the chair, and looked around the room with the soft eyes of someone visiting a familiar place they have not seen in a while. He kept this place spotless, she said. I've been coming out every week since he passed, making sure the pipes didn't freeze, making sure nothing got in. You've been coming here every week for 6 months. Promised him I would. Pearl set her glasses up on her forehead. Wasn't about to break a promise to Walter Mercer. They sat at the small table. Pearl pulled a wooden crate out of the closet and turned it over for a stool. And Eliza ate the chicken and rice, And Pearl did not push her to talk. She just sat with her hands folded and waited. And it was the best meal Eliza had eaten in 3 days. Finally, Eliza set down her fork. "Pearl, I found things in the walls, behind the baseboard, under the sink." Pearl looked at her and her face did not change. "He told me he was doing something like that," she said quietly. "Never told me what. Never told me where. Said it was between him and you." Eliza looked down at the empty plate. "Tell me what happened to my father." Pearl's hands folded a little tighter together on the table. She looked out the dark kitchen window where there was nothing now but their own faint reflection looking back. "Construction accident," she said. "A scaffold gave way on a high-rise job about 60 miles south of here. Daniel was up 4 stories when it went. He was a carpenter too, you know. Learned it all from your grandfather. Had his own little residential outfit, and he was doing fine at it. But he took that big construction job because it paid 3 times what residential paid." She paused. She looked at Eliza. "He took it to cover your grandfather's heart surgery." Eliza stopped breathing. "Walter had a bad heart. Needed an operation and the insurance wouldn't cover the whole thing. There was a gap. About $12,000. Daniel took that job to close the gap. Walter begged him not to. Told him no, said he'd rather drop dead on his own kitchen floor than put his boy up on a scaffold he didn't trust. Daniel said, 'You raised me by yourself after Mom left. You taught me everything I know. Let me take care of you for once.'" Pearl's voice went very low. The scaffold collapsed in his 3rd week on the job. Eliza could not move. "Your grandfather never forgave himself for it," Pearl said. "Believed Daniel died because of him. Because of his bad heart and his lousy insurance." She looked across the table and her eyes were wet, but her voice held steady. "And that honey is just the beginning of it. There's more in these walls. A lot more." She stood. She picked up her purse, "I'll let you find the rest in your own time." She walked to the door and paused with her hand on the knob and turned back. "But I want you to know one thing tonight, and we'll talk about the rest tomorrow. Your grandfather loved you every single day for 15 years. He sat out on that porch you're standing on every evening of his life, rain or shine, and he watched that road because he believed that one day you would come up it." She opened the door, and here you are. Then she pulled it shut behind her and the cabin was quiet again. And Eliza stood in the kitchen with her hand pressed against her mouth and understood that she had not yet found the half of what was hidden in these walls. She did not sleep that night. She tried. She rolled the duffel out on the bedroom floor and lay down on top of it with her jacket over her shoulders. But every time she shut her eyes, she saw the handwriting on the envelopes, and the 5 words burned into the lid of the box, and a man she had never met sitting in a pickup across the street from her childhood house, watching her bedroom light go dark. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up. She made coffee on the little electric burner and drank it standing at the window, watching the dark begin to bleed out of the sky above the oak tree. And when the sun finally came up, she went looking for more. She started in the bedroom, the smallest room in the house. She went over every surface the way Walter himself would have done it, the way a carpenter inspects a piece of work that is keeping a secret from him. She knelt and checked the floorboards. She ran her fingers down the window frame. She knocked on the wall in slow, careful taps, listening for the hollow knock of a space behind it. She almost missed it. The panel on the wall opposite the window was the same pine, the same finish as all the rest. But when she put her palm flat against it and pushed it, moved. Just barely. A 16th of an inch. She worked her fingers around the edges until she found the catch, a wooden button no bigger than a pencil eraser recessed into the trim at the bottom corner. She pressed it. The panel swung inward. This compartment was deeper than the others, almost a foot. Inside, side by side, were 2 stacks of envelopes, each bound with plain kitchen string. She pulled them out and sat down on the floor with her back against the bed frame. The first stack was the thicker of the 2. 15 envelopes, plain white, business-sized. She slid the string off and fanned them out across her lap, and every single envelope was addressed in Walter's hand to Maureen Caldwell, at the house Eliza had grown up in, the house she had been thrown out of 5 days ago. And across the front of every one of them in thick red ink in handwriting, she would have known anywhere, because she had grown up watching it write grocery lists and school notes and birthday cards. For relatives she would never meet was the same stamped message. Return to sender. In her mother's hand. 15 letters. 15 years. Every single one of them opened red, sealed back up and sent away. She picked up the first. The postmark was from when she was 4, just over a year after Daniel had died. She unfolded the page. Maureen, I am sober. I have been sober for 8 months. I am asking you, please let me see my granddaughter. I will come to your house. I will meet you anywhere public you choose. I will do whatever you need me to do. She is my son's daughter. Daniel would want her to know me. Please. She picked up the second. A year later. Maureen, I have filed the paperwork. My lawyer says we have a real case. I am not trying to take Eliza from you. I want 1 afternoon a month. 1 afternoon. I will bring her back the moment you say. I will sign whatever you put in front of me. Please. She read the 6th. Years in. Maureen, I know you read these before you send them back. The postmarks show me they've been opened. I do not understand what I have done that is so terrible that you would keep a man from knowing his only granddaughter. Daniel is gone. Eliza is all I have left of him in this world. Please. She read the 12th. Maureen, I have stopped hiring lawyers. I have stopped going to court. It does not work, and I cannot afford it any longer. But I want you to know something. I have not stopped. I will never stop. I am building something for her. When she is old enough, she will find me or I will find her. One of those things is going to happen. I believe that with my whole heart. Eliza set the letters down in her lap. She did not cry. The thing inside her had moved past crying into a cold, still country on the far side of it, and she sat there a long time in that country before she could make herself reach for the second stack. The second stack was only 1 envelope. It was older than the others. The paper was yellowed at the edges and gone soft. The kind of soft an envelope gets only when it has been handled many times by hands that loved it. And the writing on the front was not Walter's. It was faster younger. The letters leaning hard forward, the hand of a man who was either in a hurry or who did not often sit down to write at all. It was addressed simply, Dad. Eliza's hand went still on the envelope. She knew before she opened it whose writing this was. She had seen it once before in pencil on the back of a photograph. Daniel and Eliza, first week home. She opened it very, very carefully. 3 pages written on lined yellow legal paper. The pages were soft and worn at the folds, the creases gone nearly through where someone had unfolded them and folded them again over and over for 15 years. Dad, I know you don't want me taking this job. I know the site is bad and the foreman cuts corners. I've heard the same stories you have, but your surgery is in 6 weeks and the gap is $12,000, and I'm not going to let you skip it again. You skipped it last year. You are not skipping it this year. So stop arguing with me. You raised me by yourself after Mom left. I was 7 years old. You worked 2 jobs and came home every night and made me supper and helped me with my homework. And you never once let me feel like I was missing something. You taught me to drive a nail straight. You taught me to read a level. You taught me to keep my word. So this is me keeping my word. Let me take care of you for once. I'll be careful, Dad. I promise you. I'm not taking any risks up there. 3 months is all I need. 3 months, the gap is closed, you get your surgery, and I come home to Maureen and Eliza, and we go back to the way things were. But if something happens, which it won't, but if it does, take care of my little girl. Take care of my Eliza. Promise me, Dad. Promise me you won't let her grow up without somebody who knew me. Promise me she'll know what I sounded like. Promise me you'll tell her I loved her. Promise me. I'm 24 years old. I can't tell you how strange it is to write a letter like this, but I'm writing it because you taught me to plan for the worst, even when you're sure the worst won't come. So here it is, just in case. I love you. I'll see you Sunday. Daniel. The letter had been written 1 week before the scaffold gave way. Eliza sat on the bedroom floor with her father's last words in both hands, and she could not breathe. The lines on the page blurred. She pressed the letter to her chest and curled forward until her forehead touched her knees, and she stayed like that, not making a sound, rocking very slightly with her father's last letter pressed against her heart. She did not hear the front door open. She did not hear the footsteps in the hall. But at some point Pearl was simply there, lowering herself to the floor beside her, not touching her, not speaking, just close enough that Eliza could feel the warmth of another living person beside her in the small, bright room. They sat like that a long time. When Eliza could speak again, she handed Pearl the letter without a word. Pearl put on the reading glasses she wore on a chain at her throat and read it slowly, her lips moving very slightly with the words. And when she finished, she folded it back along its worn creases the way you fold a flag, and she pressed the bridge of her nose hard between her thumb and finger. "He never showed me this," Pearl said. "I didn't know it was in the wall. I know. Your grandfather carried your father's death every day of his life, believed it was his fault, his heart, his bills, his surgery. He could not set it down." She pushed herself up off the floor with one hand on the bed frame. "Come on, honey. Come outside. You need air." They sat on the porch steps together. The morning was cold and clear, the sun full above the trees now, and a few yellow leaves had begun to drift down off the oak in the back. The world smelled like pine and turned earth, and the cold green breath of the creek running somewhere off through the woods. After a while, Eliza took her phone out of her pocket and looked at it a long time. "What is it?" Pearl said. "He's been calling." "Who has?" "Dale, my stepfather. 4 times since yesterday. I haven't answered." She turned the phone over in her hand. "He left a voicemail this morning. You listened to it yet?" "No." Pearl did not push. She just sat with her hands folded in her lap and waited. Eliza tapped the screen and put it on speaker because she had forgotten to take it off speaker, and because some part of her wanted Pearl to hear it, wanted somebody else in the whole world to hear what she had grown up inside of. The voice was Dale's, but it was a different Dale than the one who had thrown a trash bag on her bed. "Eliza, hi, sweetheart. Listen, your mother and I have been thinking about you. We feel just terrible about how things ended. Things got said that shouldn't have been said. You know how it is. Family's family. Why don't you come on home? Your mother misses you. We'll talk it all through." A pause, and then the voice shifted, and the warmth went out of it like a switch had been thrown. "Also, we need to talk about this business with your grandfather. The lawyer called your mother. Now your mother is the next of kin Eliza, not you, your mother. That property and whatever the old man left behind that ought to be coming to her. Not to some teenager who doesn't know the first thing about what to do with it. We can work this out together as a family. But if you want to make it difficult, well, we've got a lawyer of our own. And we will go to court if we have to. I'm telling you this for your own good. You call me back." The voicemail ended. Eliza lowered the phone and set it face down on the porch boards beside her. She looked at Pearl. Pearl was looking out at the trees across the road, but her jaw had set into a hard line, and there was a small muscle working in her cheek. "Let them come," Pearl said at last. "Let them drive all the way up here and try it. This whole town knew Walter Mercer. There's not a soul in Cedar Hollow wouldn't line up at that courthouse to speak for him and for you." She reached over and put her hand briefly over Eliza's just for a moment, and then took it back. "You go on inside and eat something. You let that lawyer of yours handle the rest. And Eliza, don't you call that man back. Not today. Not until you're good and ready." She stood, walked down the steps to her truck, paused at the door and turned. "Your grandfather had a lawyer in town who is your lawyer now. Walter saw to that same as he saw to everything else. Let him carry it." She drove off, and the dust settled slow on the road where the truck had been. Eliza was still sitting on the steps an hour later when the mail truck came around the bend. An old white postal truck. The wheel on the wrong side, a yellow light turning on top. The driver was a man in his late 60s with a gray beard and a faded blue cap pulled low. He slowed to a crawl as he came up on the empty mailbox at the foot of the driveway, and then he stopped and leaned his arm out the open window and looked up at the porch. "You must be the granddaughter," he called. She nodded. He cut the engine. He climbed down slow the way an older man does when his knees have stopped cooperating and walked part way up the drive and stopped a respectful distance off and took off his cap. "Name's Otis Reed. Carried the mail on this route 26 years. Knew your grandfather the whole time since back when he was building houses down in the valley. Yes, sir. He turned the cap over in his hands. I just wanted to say, these last 15 years since he built that cabin and moved out here, your grandfather sat out on that porch every evening I ever drove past. Every single one. Rain, snow, 100-degree August. He'd lift his hand to me and I'd lift mine back. And that was how it went year after year. He cleared his throat. One day I had a package needed a signature, and he asked me up for a glass of iced tea, and I asked him. I said, Walter, what are you doing out here by yourself every evening like this? Don't you get lonesome? He looked at her. You know what he told me? She shook her head. He said, Otis, I'm waiting. She'll come one day. And when she does, I want her to see the porch first. He set his cap back on his head. Figured you ought to know that. He climbed back into his truck, started the engine, lifted his hand to her in a small wave, and drove off, the yellow light bouncing along the gravel until the sound of it faded into the trees. And Eliza put her face in her hands and stayed that way until the woods went quiet again. She went back inside. There was one room left, the living room. The fireplace. She knelt on the hearth. It was made of flat field stones fitted together without mortar, every stone tight against its neighbor. And she had admired the work yesterday. Now she looked at it differently. She looked at it the way a man who hides things looks at a wall. And there, near the bottom, one stone sat a fraction of an inch higher than the rest. The kind of thing nobody would ever notice who was not looking for it. She pressed it. Nothing. She pressed and pushed sideways and the stone shifted. She worked it free and set it aside. Underneath was a small brass handle set flush into the floor. She hooked a finger through it and pulled, and a square section of board lifted on hidden hinges, the joinery so fine she would never have found it if she had not been hunting. The hollow beneath was bigger than the others, a foot square, 6 inches deep. And inside were two things: a thick manila envelope swollen with paper, its metal clasp gone dark with age, and a small wooden box darker and heavier than the music box. Walnut, maybe. She lifted out the manila envelope first and sat down cross-legged on the floor and unbent the clasp and drew out the contents. Court documents. Pages and pages of them on heavy legal paper with official stamps and case numbers across the tops. The first set was a petition filed in the county family court when Eliza was 6. In the matter of visitation rights for Walter R. Mercer, petitioner, regarding the minor child, Eliza T. Mercer. Walter had asked for supervised visitation. He had attached character references from Pearl from his doctor, from his sponsor, from 2 former clients whose houses he had built. He had included proof of 18 months of continuous sobriety certified by his counselor. He had asked the court for 1 afternoon a month supervised by any party of Maureen's own choosing. The response from Maureen's lawyer was stapled behind it. 4 pages. It alleged a history of severe alcohol abuse. It alleged unstable living conditions. It alleged that Walter posed a danger to the minor child. And on the 3rd page, it referenced a sworn affidavit from one Dale J. Caldwell's stepfather of the minor child. Eliza turned to the affidavit. Her hands had gone steady, cold steady. The steady that comes when the body has understood before the mind has that crying is not going to help. 2 pages. I, Dale J. Caldwell, being duly sworn, declare the following to be true, under penalty of perjury. On or about the night of October the 14th, the petitioner, Walter R. Mercer, arrived at our residence in a visibly intoxicated state at approximately 11:30 p.m. He pounded on the front door for several minutes. When I opened it, he shouted threats at myself and my wife, Maureen Caldwell. He stated, and I quote, that he would kill me if I kept him from his granddaughter. He stated that he had a firearm in his vehicle. He refused to leave when asked. I called the local police, who arrived approximately 20 minutes later, by which time Mr. Mercer had departed. Signed, notarized. Eliza read it twice. Then, she read the judge's ruling 3 pages further back. The court finds that the petitioner has not demonstrated sufficient stability or sufficient evidence of a non-threatening relationship to warrant visitation at this time. Petition denied. The court further orders a no-contact restraining order at the respondent's request with a 200-foot perimeter. Petition denied. She looked again at the affidavit. She thought about the 3rd birthday card, the one written when Walter had been 2 years sober, the one where he had said the things I did before that still follow me around. He had never denied his past. He had owned it plainly in his own hand. But the man in this affidavit, the man pounding on a door at midnight, drunk, threatening murder, waving a gun, that man had never existed. Eliza knew it the way she knew her own face in the mirror. She had grown up with Dale Caldwell. She had watched him for 11 years. She had seen him lie about smaller things 10,000 times. Lie to her teachers. Lie to the neighbors. Lie to her own mother about where he had been. She knew the shape of a Dale lie the way a fisherman knows the shape of a fish moving under the surface. And she knew with absolute certainty that the man who wrote this had sat down at a kitchen table and built the whole thing out of nothing. He had committed perjury in a court of law to take her grandfather away from her, and her mother had signed off on it. She set the court papers down. She picked up the walnut box. Inside, stacked neatly and tied with string, were 15 United States savings bonds. Heavy paper. Official seals. Serial numbers across the top. She lifted them out one at a time. Each one issued in the name Eliza T. Mercer. Each one dated a year apart. The earliest from when she was 3 years old. The most recent from last spring, 6 months before Walter died. 15 bonds, one for every year. Bought one at a time by a retired carpenter living alone in a cabin in the North Woods. At the bottom of the box, folded flat against the wood, was a single sheet of yellow legal paper. A column of numbers in Walter's hand. He had added up the face values plus interest year by year. The total at the bottom was circled. $47,000. She looked at the number. She looked at the bonds spread on the floor around her. A man living alone on a carpenter's Social Security check in a cabin he was building by hand had set aside enough every single year for 15 years to buy a bond in her name. He had eaten less. He had bought less. He had patched his own clothes and fixed his own truck and saved one bond at a time year after year for a girl he was never permitted to meet. And underneath the bonds, pressed flat against the bottom of the box, was one more envelope. This one was different. Not a card. Not a court paper. Just an envelope with one word on the front in a hand shakier than all the others. Eliza. She knew before she opened it. This was the last one. This was the one he had written near the end, with hands that had begun to shake. She slid her thumb under the flap. The letter was 4 pages written on the same yellow legal paper as the column of numbers. The hand was looser than the cards from the early years, slower the strokes without their old confidence. This was a man writing with hands that had begun to fail him. Dear Eliza, if you are reading this, then you found the cabin and you found what I left for you. I hope you found it in good order. The baseboard in the living room first, then the kitchen sink, then the bedroom, then the fireplace. That is how I built them. 1 a year until I ran out of wall. There are no more. This is the last one. I want to tell you why I hid everything inside the walls instead of putting it in a bank or leaving it with a lawyer. The answer is a simple one. She cannot steal what is hidden in the walls of a house she will never set foot in. Your mother took the money I mailed. She destroyed the cards I sent. She turned every lawyer and every judge in that county against me. But she does not know this cabin exists. She has never been here, and she never will unless you decide one day to tell her. I need to tell you about your father in case nobody else ever does. Daniel died on a construction site on the morning of April the 14th. He was 24 years old. He took that job to pay for my heart surgery because my insurance was worthless, and the hospital wanted $12,000 up front. I told him not to go. I told him I would sooner die on my own kitchen floor than put him up on a scaffold he didn't trust. He went anyway. He said, "Let me take care of you for once, Dad." 3 weeks later, the scaffold gave way and my boy was gone. And I have carried that every day since. My bad heart killed my son. And then your mother took you, and I lost the both of you in the space of 2 years. I drank for 2 years. I will not pretend otherwise to you now. I drank hard, and I did things I am ashamed of, and there were nights I do not remember. I was a poor excuse for a man in those 2 years. But I got sober, Eliza. I got sober because the day you were born I made your father a promise, and I meant to keep it even after he was gone. The promise was to take care of you. I could not get to you. Your mother saw to that. So I did the only thing I have ever known how to do in this life. I built this cabin. Every joint and every shelf and every drawer. I built the hiding places in the walls 1 a year on your birthday. I bought a bond every spring. I wrote you a card every year and tucked it into a wall. And I told myself that one day when you were grown, you would find your way here. And you would find what I left. And you would know. You would know that you were loved. That is the whole of it, Eliza. That is the entire thing I wanted you to know. You were loved every single day of your life by a man you never got to meet. You were loved when you were born and grabbed hold of my finger with your whole little hand. You were loved when the court said no. You were loved when I was drinking and could not love myself. And you are loved right now, wherever I have got to. You have your father's hands, Eliza. I know it even though I never once got to see you hold a tool. Pearl told me things about you whenever she could learn anything at all. She said you were quiet and strong and you did not complain. That is Daniel. That is exactly who he was. Whatever your mother tells you about me, know this. I tried. I tried with everything I had in me. The law would not let me through the door. So I built a door of a different kind and you walk through it. The bonds are yours. The cabin is yours. Everything I built and everything I built and saved for you. I am old now and tired, and I do not think I have a great deal of time left. But I am going out of this world knowing I kept the only promise that ever mattered to me. I took care of my granddaughter. I love you, sweetheart. Your grandfather, Walter. Eliza sat on the floor of the living room and held the letter in her lap, and she did not cry. The crying was somewhere far off from her now in a quieter place she would visit later alone when she was ready for it. She read the letter again. Then she folded it back along its creases, slid it into its envelope, and set it on the wooden chair by the fireplace where she could see it. She got up. Her legs were unsteady. She went to the kitchen and drank a full glass of water, and washed her face in cold tap water, and dried her hands on the dish towel. Then she walked back out onto the porch. The afternoon was getting on. The light had begun to slant. Off in the trees, a woodpecker was working at a dead branch, and the wind moved through the pines with a long, low sound, like a man breathing out. She put both hands on the porch railing and felt the rough wood under her palms. He had cut this. He had sanded this and set it up here with his own 2 hands. She was leaning on something he had made. She straightened and she walked down the steps and around the side of the cabin to the back, where the old oak spread its arms over the patch of weeds that had once been a garden. And she stood under it and looked up at the bare branches against the pale sky. "I'm sorry," she said out loud to no one. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. I would have. If anybody had told me, I would have come." The wind moved in the branches above her. She did not know what she had expected. A sign, a feeling, something. There was nothing. Just the wind and the woodpecker and the long, slow afternoon light. But she stood there a long while anyway, and after a time she felt the smallest, strangest thing. Not a presence, not a voice. Just a quiet. A kind of quiet she had not known was possible. The quiet of a place where she had been expected. She walked back around to the front. She had work to do. There was a railing that needed sanding. She found Walter's toolbox in the closet exactly where she had left it, and she took out a square of sandpaper and walked out onto the porch and began long, even strokes with the grain, the way she had seen it done. The rough wood grew smooth under her hand. The afternoon went on. Sweat came up on her forehead despite the cold. She did not hear the car until it was halfway up the drive. It was not Pearl's truck. It was a small silver sedan with out-of-state plates. The driver's door opened first, and a woman stepped out in a long wool coat and dark glasses and stood beside the car a moment, looking up at the cabin, at the porch, at the carved leaves around the door. The passenger door did not open. Eliza could see a figure slumped low inside it, head down, looking at a phone. The woman came up the path slowly and stopped at the foot of the steps and took off her glasses and looked up at the girl standing on the porch with a piece of sandpaper in her hand. It was her mother. Maureen Caldwell was 42 years old, and she looked like she had not slept in a week. Her hair was pulled back hard. Her eyes were red at the rims, her mouth set in a thin line. Her hands clasped in front of her so tightly the knuckles had gone white. "Eliza," she said. Eliza did not answer. Maureen looked at the porch, at the half-sanded railing, at the cabin with its hand-carved door. Something moved across her face that Eliza could not read. Maybe shame, maybe grief, maybe just the look of a woman seeing for the first time a place she had spent 15 years pretending did not exist. "We need to talk," Maureen said, "about your grandfather's property." Eliza set the sandpaper down on the railing. Behind her, the passenger door of the sedan finally opened, and Dale Caldwell stepped out. He had put on a sport coat over a button-down shirt the way a man dresses when he wants to look like he means business. He did not come up the drive. He leaned against the side of the car with his arms folded. The afternoon was very still. Eliza looked at her mother, then past her at Dale leaning on the car, then back at her mother. "Come up on the porch," she said quietly. "Just you, not him." Maureen hesitated. Then she climbed the steps. Eliza turned and went into the cabin alone. She came back out a moment later carrying the bundle of 15 letters tied with kitchen string, and she set it on the porch railing and fanned the envelopes out so the red return to sender stamps showed on every one. Maureen Caldwell looked down at her own handwriting. 15 years of it splashed in red ink across her father-in-law's letters, and the color drained out of her face like a tide going out. She put one hand on the railing to steady herself. She did not speak. Eliza did not either. The light came slanting through the pines, and the woodpecker started up again somewhere off in the trees. And on the porch of the cabin Walter Mercer had built, the two women stood across from each other with 15 years of lies laid out on the railing between them. "I can explain those," Maureen said finally. "I'm sure you can. Eliza, I read them, Mom. I read all of them." Maureen closed her eyes. "He wrote to you every year for 15 years. He apologized in some of them. He begged in some of them. In one, he said he just wanted one afternoon a month. One afternoon. And you wrote return to sender on every single one. It was complicated." "No," Eliza said. The word came out flat. She was past anger now, somewhere on the far side of it in that cold country, and her voice came from there. "It wasn't complicated. He was an old man trying to know his granddaughter, and you said no every time for 15 years. There is nothing complicated about that." Maureen opened her eyes. Her face had gone very pale. "You don't know what he was like. You told me he was dead." The sentence hung in the air. Maureen flinched as though she had been struck. "You looked at me when I was a child," Eliza said, "and you told me my grandfather had died before I was born. You let me grow up believing it. You let me write an essay in the 4th grade about how I had no living grandparents. I remember writing it. The teacher gave me a sticker for the handwriting. He was 5 hours away, Mom. He was alive the whole time. He sat on this porch every single evening for 15 years and watched the road. And you knew. You knew where he was. And you knew what he was doing, and you let me believe he was in the ground." Maureen's hand on the railing began to shake. Down by the car, Dale straightened up. He uncrossed his arms. He took a step away from the sedan. Eliza saw him do it. "Stay where you are, Dale," she called. He stopped. "This isn't about you yet." He stood very still in the middle of the driveway, his sport coat catching the wind, and looked up at the porch with an expression Eliza did not bother to read. She turned back to her mother. "There's more," she said. She walked inside and came back out with the manila envelope from beneath the hearth, and she set it on the railing beside the letters and drew out the affidavit and laid it on top so the heading faced her mother. Maureen read the first line. Her hand went to her mouth. "You knew about this," Eliza said. "Your lawyer used it in court to deny him visitation, to get a restraining order. This is the paper that kept him 200 feet away from me for the rest of my childhood." Maureen did not answer. "Did it happen?" Eliza said. "Did he come to the house in the middle of the night drunk and threaten to kill Dale and wave a gun around? Did that happen?" A long, long pause. "No," Maureen said, very quietly. "He came to the house once. One time. He'd been drinking. He wasn't violent. He was crying Eliza. He stood on the porch and asked to see you. Dale answered the door and told him to leave, and Walter left. That was the whole of it. He never came back. And the gun. There was no gun. And the threats. There were no threats." Eliza looked at her mother in the slanting light. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Dale committed perjury in a court of law to take my grandfather away from me, and you signed off on it." At the bottom of the driveway, Dale started up the path. "That's enough," he called. "That is enough of this. Maureen, we are leaving." "Stop right there, Dale." He did not stop. He came up the path. He climbed the first step. He climbed the second. He never made it to the third. A truck door slammed somewhere up the road. Then another closer. Eliza did not turn to look because she did not need to. She knew the sound of Pearl Hadley's old Ford. She had heard it on this driveway more than once in the days since she had come. Pearl came up the path slowly. She did not hurry. She walked with the deliberate steadiness of a woman who had decided how this was gonna go before she ever got out of the truck, and her hands were empty, and her face was calm. And she stopped at the foot of the steps about 6 feet from Dale and folded her arms across her chest and looked at him. "Afternoon," she said. Dale looked at her. "This is a family conversation, ma'am." "That's so." Another vehicle came around the bend. A red pickup dented along one side a load of 2x4s strapped in the bed. It pulled up behind Pearl's truck and the engine cut, and a man stepped out. 60s. Square through the shoulders, a quilted vest over a flannel shirt, a clipboard in one hand. He did not say a word. He walked partway up the drive and stopped and stood there, with the clipboard at his side. Then, from the other direction, came the slow rumble of the postal truck. It came around the bend at its normal speed, and then it slowed and then it stopped right in the middle of the road. Otis Reed cut the engine and climbed down. He did not come up the drive. He just stood beside his truck with his hands in his pockets and looked up at the porch. 3 of them, standing there, not speaking, not coming closer, not doing one single thing except being present. Dale Caldwell looked at Pearl. He looked at the man with the clipboard. He looked at the mail carrier. And then he looked up at the porch at Eliza standing there, with the affidavit in her hand, and 15 years of return letters fanned out on the railing behind her. Something happened to his face. Eliza had grown up with Dale Caldwell. She had watched him for 11 years in every mood a man could be in, and she had thought she knew every face he owned. But she had never seen the one he wore now. He looked like a man who had walked into a room expecting one person to be waiting for him, and had found 100. The color went out of him in stages. He took a step back down the steps, then another. He did not look at Maureen. He did not look at anyone. He turned, walked back down the path to the sedan, opened the driver's door, and got in. And he did not start the engine. He just sat there behind the wheel with his hands in his lap and his head down. And after a long moment, Eliza understood that he was waiting for Maureen. She turned back to her mother. Maureen was crying. Not loudly. Not the way she had ever cried in front of Eliza before. It was the quiet, exhausted crying of a person who has been holding something a very long time and has finally set it down and discovered she no longer remembers how to stand up without it. "I want to tell you something," Maureen said. Eliza waited. "When I look at you, I see Daniel." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "You have his hands. You go quiet when you're angry the way he did instead of yelling. You tilt your head when you're thinking that little tilt to the left. Every single thing about you." She drew a long breath. And Walter's letters. Every one of them had Daniel's name in it. Daniel would want this. Daniel would have wanted that. Remember what Daniel said. Remember what Daniel did. Her voice broke. "I could not read his name, Eliza. I could not read his name without coming apart. I was a widow at 24, with a 3-year-old, and a father-in-law showing up at my door crying and drunk in the middle of the night. I could not hold any of it, so I closed the door. I closed all the doors." She pressed her fist against her mouth. "I wasn't protecting you from him," she said. "I was protecting myself from remembering." She looked up. "Dale was wrong to lie, and I was wrong to let him. I knew it was a lie when he signed that paper, and I let him do it because I was tired. I was so tired, Eliza. So tired of fighting. So tired of feeling. I let Dale handle everything because it was easier than handling anything myself. And when Walter's letters came, I stamped them and sent them back because reading them was like opening a door I had nailed shut, and I could not open it. Not for him. Not even for you." She lowered her hand. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me. I'm only telling you because you asked and because the truth has come this far already. And I don't think I can carry it another 15 years. Eliza did not speak. The wind moved in the pines. Down at the road, Otis Reed lifted his cap, ran a hand through his hair, set it back on his head. The man with the clipboard had not moved. Eliza thought about her father. She thought about a 24-year-old woman sitting alone in a hospital corridor being told her husband was dead. She thought about a 3-year-old in that woman's lap. She thought about the years that came after the years she could not remember before Dale, when her mother had been alone with a small child and a grief no one had ever taught her how to carry. She did not forgive her mother. She did not think she ever fully could, not the way some people forgive. But she understood her a little, for the first time in her life. She walked into the cabin. She came back out with a chip white mug of coffee and held it out. and Maureen took it in both hands and did not say thank you. Just held it and let the steam rise into her face and closed her eyes against it. Sit down, Mom. Maureen sat in the wooden chair on the porch. Eliza sat on the top step. They did not speak for a long time. The afternoon went on, and at the bottom of the drive, one by one, Pearl and the man with the clipboard and Otis Reed returned to their vehicles. Pearl got into her truck. She did not start it. She just sat in the cab, with the window down, waiting. After a while, Eliza spoke. Do you want to see the inside? Maureen nodded. Eliza took her through slowly. She did not narrate. She just opened doors and let her mother look. Maureen walked through the rooms with her hands clasped, touching the walls, touching the shelves, and she stopped at the kitchen window and looked out at the oak. He built this with his own hands, Eliza said. Every joint. 15 years. I never came up here, Maureen said. I never let myself imagine it. In the living room, she stopped before the fireplace where the photograph of Daniel holding the baby in the yellow blanket stood propped on the mantel. Walter took that picture, Maureen said. I forgot that. He came to the hospital the day after you were born, and he took that picture of Daniel holding you. She picked it up in both hands and looked at her dead husband's face and at her own daughter as a newborn, and the tears came again, quieter this time. She set it back exactly as she had found it. Eliza showed her the first 3 cards, 6, 7, 8. Maureen read all 3, standing there, her hands shaking the whole time, and did not put them down until she had finished. He was a better man than I gave him credit for, she said. Pearl came to see you once, a year after Daniel died. Drove all the way down to tell you he was sober and sorry and asking for one chance. You told her to leave and never come back. Maureen nodded slowly. That sounds like her. Maureen left around 6. Dale started the car the moment she came down the steps and sat behind the wheel without looking at the cabin or at Pearl's truck or at anyone. Maureen opened the passenger door and paused and looked back at the porch. I'm sorry, Eliza, I know that's not enough. No, Mom, it isn't. Maureen nodded once. She got in. The sedan backed slowly down the drive, turned at the wide spot, and drove off through the trees, and the sound of the engine faded into the woods. Eliza stood on the porch and watched the dust settle. Pearl got out and came up the path. You all right, honey? I will be. You did good. You did real good. Eliza did not answer. She did not feel like she had done good. She felt like she had done something necessary. And the difference between necessary and good was a thing she had not known existed until that afternoon. Pearl sat with her on the step until the sun went down behind the pines. They did not talk much. After a while, Pearl stood. Brought you a pie. Left it in the truck. She came back with a foil-covered tin and set it on the railing where the letters had been an hour before. Blueberry. Figured today was a blueberry pie kind of day. She did not stay to eat it. She knew the way some people know that Eliza needed to be alone. She lifted her hand, got into her truck, and drove away. Eliza ate 2 pieces of pie, sitting on the step in the dark. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, the phone rang. She was outside hauling old garden tools out of the shed, and she came in wiping her hands on her jeans. It was Arthur Glenn. Miss Mercer, I wanted to let you know that your mother's attorney called this morning. They are withdrawing the petition. There will be no contest of the will. Everything stays exactly as your grandfather left it. Why? That I don't know. I didn't ask, but it's gone. She thanked him and hung up and stood there a moment looking at the wooden chair by the fireplace. Maureen called that evening. The calls were always short. 10 minutes, 12 sometimes. Not warm, not easy. But they happened once a week on Tuesdays, and Eliza did not refuse them. I left him, Maureen said. I asked Dale to move out. He's gone to his brother's over in another county. What happened? I saw the affidavit, Eliza. When you laid it out on the railing, I hadn't looked at it in 12 years. I'd let myself forget what was in it. And seeing it laid out there with all the letters, I understood something I'd been refusing to understand for a long time. That I'd built a life with a man who would do that, who would sit at a kitchen table and write down a lie about a grieving old man and sign it under oath just to keep his stepdaughter from her own family. I built a life on top of that. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Eliza did not answer. He's not coming back. I'm not saying that to win you. I'm saying it because it's true. In the town up here, those people who came to your porch, word has gotten around. People at the diner stop talking when he walks in. 2 of his customers moved their business. Small towns have a way of handling things. I'm learning that. After they hung up, Eliza sat in the wooden chair a long time. She did not feel triumphant. She felt something closer to a quiet that had settled into the rooms of the cabin and into the corners of her life. The quiet that comes when a thing that should never have been said is finally laid out where it can be seen for what it was. The weeks turned into a month, and then 2. She worked her way down a list of everything the cabin needed, one item at a time. She replaced a rotten porch post with lumber milled at the sawmill over the ridge. She rebuilt the back step. She fixed the bedroom window latch. She oiled every hinge in the house until the doors moved without a sound the way Walter had wanted them to. She bought a used bed from a family in town and a small kitchen table, and she built a bookshelf for the alcove by the fireplace out of scrap lumber. The joints were tight, but not invisible. She was still learning, but it was hers, and the books on it were hers, and that was enough. She used part of the bond money to enroll at the community college, 20 miles east. Design and carpentry. 2 classes and a workshop where she learned the table saw and the router and the jointer. Her instructor was a retired contractor named Mr. Whitfield, a big, quiet man who watched her fit a mortise and tenon joint one afternoon and said nothing until she was done. "You've got good hands," he said. "You don't fight the wood. Most beginners push too hard. You let it tell you where to go." She did not answer. She just nodded because she did not trust her voice. She thought about a line in her grandfather's last letter. "You have your father's hands, Eliza." She worked weekends at Pearl's store, stocking shelves and running the register, and carrying things out to people's trucks. And she learned the names of everybody who came in and which ones needed help and which wanted to be left alone. And she found she liked the work in a way she had never liked any work. It was honest. The shelves either had soup on them or they didn't. The register either balanced or it didn't. There was no pretending in it. In the winter, she joined the volunteer fire department. She trained on Thursday evenings with 8 others, learning to roll hose and work the pump. And the older men in their 60s and 70s who had been on the department for decades Talk to her not as a teenager, but as a person who had chosen to show up. That was all that mattered to them, that she had shown up. In spring, she sewed curtains for the windows out of white cotton with a thin blue stripe. The hems not quite even the stitching wandering in places but hers. And when the morning light came through them, it turned the room soft and warm. She planted a garden in the patch behind the house. Tomatoes and peppers and beans, with seeds Pearl gave her, and stakes she cut from the dead lower limbs of the oak. She watered the rows every morning and every evening the way her grandfather would have, and she watched for the first green shoots. And they came. And on a Saturday morning in April, she was behind the counter at Pearl's store when the bell over the door rang and a girl walked in, 16, maybe 17, a thin jacket a size too small for the cold, a backpack over one shoulder, hair pulled back tight. She stood just inside the door a moment and scanned the store the way a person scans a room when they are not sure they are welcome. Her shoulders were pulled in. One hand stayed in her jacket pocket and did not come out. Eliza knew her at a glance, not the face she had never seen the girl before. She knew the way she stood. She knew the narrow, ready stillness of a person who had learned to take up as little room as possible, who was always halfway to the door, who had been told without words for a long time that she was a problem somebody else was going to have to solve. The girl drifted to the back to the sandwich cooler. She looked at the prices. She pulled a small fold of bills from her jeans and counted it again, and put it back and turned to go. "Hey," Eliza said. The girl stopped. She did not turn around. "You want a sandwich?" "I don't have enough." "I didn't ask if you had enough. I asked if you wanted one." The girl turned slowly and looked at her, the eyes of a person trying to find the catch. "Pick one out," Eliza said. The girl did not move for a long second. Then, slowly, as if she expected to be stopped, she walked back to the cooler and chose a turkey sandwich and brought it to the counter. Eliza took a bottle of water from the fridge, rang both up, paid for them out of her own pocket, and pushed them across. "There's a stool back there, by the window. Sit and eat if you want. Take as long as you like." The girl looked at the sandwich, at the water, at Eliza. "Why?" "Because somebody did it for me, about 6 months ago." The girl took the food and went to the stool by the window and sat and unwrapped the sandwich slowly, as if she did not quite believe it was real, and ate it in small, careful bites, looking out the window the whole time. Eliza went back to stocking cans. She did not watch. She did not want the girl to feel watched. Pearl stood in the doorway to the storeroom with her arms folded and said nothing. When the girl finished, she folded the wrapper into a neat square, put it in the trash, and came to the counter. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Eliza tore a slip from the pad by the register and wrote a number on it and slid it across. "That's my phone. If you need anything, a place to sit, a sandwich, somebody to call, that's the number. You don't know me. I know. You don't have to do anything about that. Just keep the number." The girl looked at it a moment, then folded it once and put it in the inside pocket of her jacket, the small zippered one, the one she had probably learned a long time ago to put important things in. She nodded and walked out, and the bell rang behind her. Pearl came up beside Eliza after a while, and picked up a can of tomato soup and turned it in her hand as though she had never seen one. Walter would have done the same thing. I know. That's how it works. Somebody does it for you, you do it for somebody else. It's a small thing. It's not the answer to anything. But it's how a town like this gets to be a town like this. She set the can on the shelf and walked away. That evening, Eliza sat in the rocking chair on the porch, an oak chair she had bought secondhand, worn smooth by years of use, by somebody she would never know. She had a cup of coffee in her hands. The sun was going down behind the pines, the sky orange at the bottom, and a deep cold blue at the top. The first stars just coming out in the east. Inside on the mantel, the photograph of Daniel stood in a small wooden frame she had made in Mr. Whitfield's workshop. Beside it in a frame she had made the same week was a photograph her mother had mailed up a month ago. Walter Mercer in a red flannel shirt sitting in a kitchen chair with a baby in the crook of his arm, looking down at her with the closed, careful smile of a man holding something more precious to him than he had words for. The baby was Eliza wrapped in a yellow blanket. She had not known the photograph existed. Her mother had sent it in a box of other things she had kept in a drawer for 15 years and never been able to throw away. A small pair of baby shoes. A wooden rattle Daniel had whittled by hand before his daughter was born. Eliza had set the rattle on the mantel between the two photographs where it caught the light. She had not forgiven her mother. Not all the way. She did not think that was the kind of thing that happened all at once. Or maybe ever. Not completely. But she had stopped refusing the calls. Maureen had been driving to a counselor twice a month. She had not asked anything of Eliza. She had only said, "I'm working on it. I want you to know I'm working on it." And Eliza had said, "All right, Mom." And that was where they were. In their last call, Maureen had asked if there was anything Eliza wanted from the old house. Eliza had said no. She had said she was building her own life now, and the cabin was enough. Maureen had been quiet a long time on the other end of the line. And then she had said, "I'm glad, sweetheart. I'm glad about that." The sun went all the way down. The pines turned black against the deepening sky. The first crickets started up out back where the garden was coming in. Eliza rocked slowly in the chair on the porch her grandfather had built. She thought about how she had come here, a black trash bag on a bed at 7 in the morning, $34 in her pocket, and 3 nights in the back seat of a Honda Civic. A phone call from a lawyer she had never met, telling her that a grandfather she had been told was dead had been alive the whole time, waiting in a town she had never heard of. She thought about the first compartment behind the baseboard, and the music box, and her father's letter written 1 week before the scaffold gave way. 15 letters stamped "Return to Sender." A man in a pickup across the street from her childhood house, watching her bedroom light go out, then driving home to write a card he would never be allowed to send. Pearl in the driveway with her arms folded. Otis stopping his mail truck in the middle of the road. The man with the clipboard, who had never spoken a word, and whose presence had been enough. A girl in a thin jacket walking out of the store with a sandwich and a folded slip of paper in her inside pocket. Every joint in this cabin was a sentence. Every hidden compartment was a chapter. The whole house was a letter written in pine and oak and cedar from a man who had not been allowed to send any other kind to the granddaughter he had loved every single day of his life. She had arrived with a trash bag and $34. She had been told for as long as she could remember that nobody on her father's side had wanted her, that her grandfather had died before she was born, and her father in an accident she would never understand, and there was no one else. Every word of it had been a lie. And what Walter Mercer had hidden in the walls of this cabin was the proof. Proof that she had been loved her entire life by somebody she had never gotten the chance to know. That was enough. That was more than enough. It was, in fact, almost too much to carry. But she had carried less for longer, and she could carry this. She finished the coffee. The stars were thick across the sky now. The way they only got out here where the nearest streetlight was 4 miles down a dirt road. She stood and the rocker rocked a couple of times behind her and went still. And she went inside and set the empty mug in the sink and walked through the living room past the chair, past the bookshelf she had built, past the mantel with the photographs and the rattle and the music box. She paused at the music box. She wound it 3 times and let it play. And the lullaby filled the small cabin slow and gentle, the same tune Walter had set into the brass cylinder at his workbench some night 15 or 20 years ago. She had never known its name, but she had begun to recognize it now the way a person recognizes the smell of a kitchen they grew up in. It was hers. It had been made for her. And every time it played, it filled the cabin with something that was not silence exactly, but the kind of full quiet that lives in a room where somebody who loves you has just stopped speaking. The mechanism wound down. Eliza stood a moment in the dark living room of the cabin her grandfather built. Then she walked down the short hallway to the bedroom and turned off the light, and went to bed in a place where she finally completely belonged.